My name is Rick Searls, and I was a sergeant in the United States Marine Corps, and I was a helicopter crew chief in Vietnam from '68 to '69. I volunteered. I was originally drafted, but then I went and volunteered because I didn't want to go into the 2-year program that the Army offered, but I wanted to go into aviation, so the Marine Corps offered that to me, so I went in for 4 years. So I volunteered.
How old were you?
18 years old.
18.
Back then, the draft was on, and when a young man graduated from high school, he went up on one side of the platform, and on the other end, it's about like they handed your draft card to you. So you really didn't have much choice back then, but I was drafted, but I went ahead and volunteered. Well, my father was a Marine, and he fought in Guadalcanal in Great Britain, Gloucester, and during World War II. And I used to look at his Marine thing that he had, an album that he had, and all through the years I always wanted to be like my dad. And so after high school, the war was on, and we didn't have a choice, so I went in the Marines. He inspired me to do, with his life, so that's how I got in the Marines. Vietnam was very heavy because I graduated in '66, so it was going on prior to my graduation, and a lot of young men in our town where we lived in Duncan Falls, Ohio, most of them were drafted and they went off to war, and I wanted to follow them, to follow in their footsteps. So I was very aware of the war at that time. There was a lot of patriotism in our country then, more so than I see now. And to go off to war was something the young man I wanted to do, to serve my country, and to follow those that had gone on before me, that set the example to be patriots and do what we were asked to do. And so that's the reason why I was wanted to do it. It was very heavy. Of course, I went in right after Quezon and Way. I was right on the back tail of them. And so Vietnam was very hot then, up in the northern part where we were stationed out of Phu Bai. And so we had a lot of activity. We were very busy with our missions, day in and day out. And so we had a very, very busy schedule, in supplying the Marines out in the field and doing insertions, extractions, medevacs, whatever was required of us, we were there to do. We went to Vietnam. I left in 1968 out of San Diego Naval Base. On a ship, we took our 10 helicopters and our squadron over to Vietnam. And so I forget how many days it took us to get there from San Diego to Vietnam. But the night before we were going the next morning to Phu Bai, where we was going to be stationed, we were cruising up the east side of the South Vietnam there, just about 9 degrees from Marble Mountain, which is Da Nang, Marble Mountain area. And that morning, the VC had thrown in about 180 rockets into that compound. And so we're sitting off the beach there, green as could be, wanting to go in and do what, to fight and things, and hear all this stuff's blowing up, and you think, what did I get myself into, But so that was my first impression, there's really a war over here. There's somebody after you, so you're going to be on your toes all the time. And so we flew into Phu Bai and got set up, and that's where we operated out of, which is south of Way, about 50 miles. And we operate up in the northern section, the DMZ, over into Laos, Ah Chau Valley, and in that area. So we were going day and night. I was the crew chief. I was assigned to a helicopter, and I took care of it maintenance-wise. We had other groups, hydraulics and different things, but I had to make sure everything on the helicopter was up and running, ready to go at all times. We did the maintenance work on it. And so I also was one of the door gunners, along with being a crew chief. So we only carried one gunner with us, plus myself. And so we were responsible for that aircraft to make sure it's ready to go at all times. And the work that other departments did on it, we had to make sure they did it right in order to make sure we had safety of flight. It was interesting at times.
Yeah.
I remember one time we got caught in anti-aircraft fire coming out of Camp Carroll, heading back to Quantree up on the east side of the island there, and was going down Highway 1. And I looked back to my right about the 5 o'clock position to see these big tracers coming out at us. And here the VC had set up a anti-aircraft site there somehow, and we got caught in that. And the rounds just started coming up at us as we were going over. And one time I jumped because I thought it was going to come right on through us, but it just went right underneath of us, and we was able to get out away from it. So we had times like that and other things going into other LZs that we took a lot of fire. You know, supplying, getting people in and get them out. And so at times it was very, 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 what we call hot, you know. I had a load shot out from underneath of me one time up on the DMZ, and I was carrying a helicopter, had a net, was called hauling 105 and 50 caliber round up to a fire base up north who needed it because they were taking fire and mortars every night from the VC. And so it was in monsoon season, so it was in the evening. We had enough daylight just to get up there and get back. And so as we was hauling that up, was going up through the valley, and all of a sudden the strap got shot, and the load dropped, and the strap went back and hit my tail rotor.
Wow.
And it took the counterweight out of it. So we had to more or less crash land in the side of the mountain up there. And I had to spend the night up there. We had to get 10 Marines out of the LZ up there to come down and help us guard the aircraft until we could get a tail rotor blade up the next morning. And of course, we was on the alert all night long. It was raining, cold, blowing, and we got report that there had been a great big VC group passing by where we were. So we thought we would get attacked that night, but thankfully we didn't. It was definitely outmanned and outgunned,
Yeah.
you know. So there's times like that you have that's very interesting. The fire base was probably maybe a mile up the mountain, and they had a couple of tanks up there. So they sent one down to help support us, usually during the night. But when he came down, we got word that another tank got stuck in the river down below us. So they called him to go down and help him. So he goes down there, and now they're both stuck. So we have no protection that night, you know, from any tanks or anything. So that could have been, if we'd had it, could have been a big deterrent to the adversary to, you know, to try to come in and take you over. But we were fortunate. Nothing like that happened. So for the crew chief, as I said, we were responsible for the aircraft. So we were with it all the time. Like if we were back in the barracks, then in the morning, way before, maybe 4 o'clock in the morning, we'd get up, go down and start preparing the aircraft for the morning mission. And we would know about what time we were departing. So we'd go down and, you know, look at it mechanically and hydraulically and everything, make sure it's all ready, and pre-flight it, what we call it, before the pilots came, and then they would pre-flight it. And then early before sun comes up, we would launch out. And we'd be gone all day, sometimes way up into maybe midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning. And so then you come back and try to get some rest, try to get some chow at the chow hall. And, you know, 12 o'clock at night, food's not very good then. And then get a little bit of rest and go back down and repeat the thing day in and day out. So if we had mechanical problems, we stayed there and worked on it until they were fixed and the chopper was ready to go. So sometimes you could work 24, 36 hours, just trying to get things ready for when that next mission comes up, you're ready to go. So a typical day, just do checking, maintenance, and just day at day and ready to go. They all varied. Sometimes we would supply if the grunts were out at the LZ landing zone or moving through an area. We would, if they needed supplies, we would go in, bring the supplies to them, and then of course if they had casualties, we'd extract them, or we'd take reinforcements in. So the mission always varied, from day to day and to mission. So a lot of times, the one that got me more than anything was we were up at Camp Carroll and we were stationed a helicopter up there every night for emergency extractions. So it was my turn to be up there, and it was a foggy night. I mean, you couldn't hardly see your hand in front of your face. And about, midnight, 1 o'clock in the morning, we got a call up from north of Quantry. Some Marines were up there, and we got a call that they were being overrun by the VC, and they needed to be extracted or get reinforcements in there or air support, but you couldn't do it because it's too foggy. You couldn't get anything into them. Mm-hmm. So we got the call and we cranked up, got the rotors ready to go, but we couldn't get released because it wouldn't do any good. You couldn't see the ground, didn't know, where anything was. So we eventually had just to shut down and wait, and we listened to the battle going on our headsets. They were calling in for help, but we couldn't get them any at that time. Then all of a sudden everything went dead silent. And then we could hear the VC voice on the radio. So we knew then they had been overrun. So we had to wait till the next morning for the fog to lift in order to get up in there and to see how much damage was done, and they were all gone. So those are the hard times, when you can't do anything, somebody needs that help, whether it be air or ground. It's just, you're just stuck. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, Hamburger Hill was a mess, but we conquered it, got the mission done along with the Army and the Marine Corps, and so it was a bloody battle. It's named by Hamburger Hill. Mm-hmm. And so it went on for a while, but a lot of times, sometimes we'd have a fire base on top of a mountain, and we would take that mountain, and the VC would, the NVA would start coming up from the bottom to try to overcome it, and we would fight them off. And so we started a fire base over here. And what we did was we had an armored vehicle called an Ontos that had 6 rocket grenade launchers on the side, 3 on each side. And we took those cannons off and put them in the belly of our helicopter. Then we made false wooden bulldozer blades and tacked it on the front of them. And so when the VC saw us, or the NVA saw us go up there to put that, to them it was bulldozer. Then we set it down and we took the wooden thing off the front of it, wasn't any good anyway, and put the barrels back on it. And when they came up that night, we were waiting on them. They didn't realize they were Ontoses instead of bulldozers. So we played, not games, but there's things you just gotta stay ahead of like that, in order to survive. And so they play their tricks, we play our tricks. And so, but we stopped that right away. Mm-hmm. They weren't too anxious to climb the mountain anymore. Right. Well, we started hauling them in around early morning and got them in there in early afternoon, so they were set up and ready to confront the enemy when he came up. So there's things that you saw there that you really didn't agree with, but you know, we have a Marine Corps, we have a saying, we're not to ask why, we're just to do and die. So when the mission came up, we went out and did the mission. And we know that now, more now we knew then, the political side of it, you know, and we hate that, but that's the way it was. But when you came home, you know, we were branded as baby killers and all this kind of stuff, and because the hippie movement was going on and they were protesting and all that. And so I told somebody, I said, you know, the baby killers were really the NVA and the Viet Cong. Sometimes we'd get called into a village where the North Vietnamese army and the Viet Cong would invade that village, and they would just kill them. The babies, kill the men, kill the women, and we'd go in and kind of mop up, clean up, you know, afterwards. And so actually, in my opinion, they were the baby killers, not us. And so, but that's war. Hauled quite a few of them out in the battlefield, and of course they were along with the Marines and stuff. But as far as personally working with them at Phu-Bai at our flight base, no, we didn't have any there. We had an infiltration of the NVA, North Vietnamese Army. They had young men come out of there and they would join the South Vietnamese Army. And what they did was, like, we'd go in and we would pick up some South Vietnamese Army, quote unquote, but they were infiltrated with these infiltrators. And I was going into an LZ one time, and from a 53 and a 46 had just picked up, and he was leaving, was coming in behind him, and about right here he exploded. And what had happened was those North Vietnamese infiltrated the South Vietnamese Army, set off a grenade inside the 46 and killed him. And of course they were doing crazy things. Like when you let them off, they would come around in front of your helicopter and they would fire at the pilots. So whenever I hauled them, I swung my M60 around from the door down the back of the helicopter, right straight down, and told them that if anybody moved, and I made them sit in the middle so they couldn't get a hold of the pouches, put their hands in there. And if any of them would move, I told them I'd shoot them right there. Because you couldn't take a chance with them. So you didn't know who was the true, who was the false. And so you always had that in your mind whenever you were working with them, who is the right guy and who is the wrong guy. And so that kept you on your toes all the time. And so even when you got out the back and would go out to the side to where they're supposed to go, you had to turn your 60 around there, you know, to make sure no one, you know, tried to fire at you. So there were some real problems there. And so we just had to be very cautious with them. So what we saw and what we were ordered to do, our leaders, really our lieutenant colonel there, his was to take any mission that came up. He wanted it. Don't care how bad or how silly it was. He wanted to do it. So his goal was to get out to win the war. And so that inspired us to go beyond maybe what we would want to do, because he had that drive and that ambition to win the war. And so the ones that we had in our squadron were really great. They really were. I came back in, I think it was October or September '69. And of course, we were made aware of that before we even got here, so we kind of prepared ourselves for that. And really, you know, we didn't always agree what was taking place in Vietnam, but we were asked to do that. Our country asked us to do that, and so we wanted to do that. Most of us, not all of us, but most of us wanted to do that. And then to come back and to see this, it was just something contrary to what we were used to before we left or what we grew up with. And then we see this atmosphere of, you know, just, it was just really sickening, really, and heartening to see our country. And, you know, there's a lot of things we don't agree with, but the way that things they would say to you, you know, you thought, you don't understand, you know. And so you just accept it after a while, and you just have to move on. If you don't, you can, you know, get bitter or whatever. Mm-hmm. I'll tell you, it could have been one. If we were allowed to have done what we were called to do. Like I said, there was, as we know, it's no secret, it was a lot of politics involved. And I know personally myself, we were out and we caught a VC going down the Ho Chi Minh Trail, and I asked permission to fire on him. And so we called in and asked to do that, and they said no, they wouldn't let us do it. And so there were several times that things like that happened, you know, and or else we'd be pushing and driving and then get called back or whatever. And so it was confusing, you know, because we volunteered, we went there to kill the Viet Cong, but there are times we weren't allowed to do that. And maybe that's not all bad, you don't have to live with it, you know, so. Well, I wasn't a Christian then. The Lord really watched over me, even though I didn't know He was. A lot of times when I'd come in from missions, having almost been killed, I'd go back to the barracks for the few moments that I had, and I'd get out my little Gideon Bible that they used to give us. And I'd open it up, knowing that, hey, I may not be back the next trip. And so I looked for some comfort in it, but I didn't know anything about it. So I'd open up to Matthew, chapter 1. So-and-so begat so-and-so, and I'm thinking, if this is what this thing's all about, I don't want anything to do with it. You know, it's not bringing any hope or security to me, because I didn't know anything. I didn't know to go on and read it, you know. But, you know, all the time I was in the Marine Corps, I was never witnessed to once, not one time. But then, once I got out of the Marine Corps, some things that I experienced through the war, I brought into my life when I was out of the Marine Corps, and then I was able to be introduced to a good Bible-believing church where Pastor Dale McAllister pastored, and he preached hard on, you know, being saved in your center, and that's when I realized that I need to be saved. And since then, I still have these flashbacks. I get PTSD. And when it comes, I can just go to the Lord and get relief from it. It'll never probably completely leave until the rapture or I die, one or the other. But I have a hope now. I have someone and some place to turn when these things come up, you know, and just talk to Him about them, and He brings the comfort, you know, that I need during that time.